seconds.
Is this where the damn drumming and the music kicks in?
Yeah. Hello and welcome to On the Pipe Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Tyler Shepherdson, and today is Wednesday, December the 7th, 2022, years after zero. And I know what you're thinking, and yes, you're right. It is only 173 days until we go racing at the very first ever Bite GP presented by On the Pipe Podcast, and I'm stoked for it. I hope you're stoked for it. 173 is away from racing on Father's Day weekend, the Saturday before Father's Day, the day before. 173 days away from right now while you're hearing my voice. But we got a show tonight. We got a good bit of things to talk about. We got a little bit of house cleaning that we're going to get into, and then we're going to talk about the weekend that was, and the weekend that was for me, and I'm sure a lot of you keeping tabs along with it, was the Terra Inferno 2022 race down in the white sands of Cap Cana, just below Punta Cana in the Dominican Republic. It was put on by Travis Pastrana and Ryan Sipes, and it had some of the world's best riders. It was a good time. Had a lot of fun, and there's a lot of riders down there and a lot of stuff that happened. So there was a lot of questions by us at the event, so I'm sure that there's a lot of questions from you guys watching the event. So we'll get into a little bit of that, and then talk about some other stuff that is going on with the show and racing. But first, I want to let you guys know, as always, that Beta Motorcycles is the official manufacturer of On the Pipe Podcast. Beta Motorcycles has been family-owned and operated since 1905. They manufacture the finest enduro trials and dual sport motorcycles that are known for their premium quality and rideability. Beta motorcycles are the best looking bikes on the market, and they back it up with their superior performance. Head over to betausa.com for more information on their available models, or to find a dealer near you to get yours today. This episode is also brought to you in part by Zach Tussle at Raymond James Financial. Zach is a racer and a financial advisor that helps his clients win when it comes to retirement and financial planning. If you or someone you know wants to save and invest for their future, or is already retired and needs advice for income during retirement, Zach Tussle is always my first recommendation. Find out more by Googling Zach Tussle, or you can go to their website, financialadvisorsdenvernc.com, or check them out on the social medias at Zach Tussle. You can find out how to spell his name. He was on the show. You should listen to that episode and hear how Zach can help you out. And now's a great time to get into the stock market, especially if you're not in the stock market already. If you are in the market already, now is a great time to double down, because it's like a Black Friday deal on your future. And it's available to you right now. So don't wait. Don't delay. Call Zach Tussle today. Unless it's too late today, then call him during business hours tomorrow. You know what I mean? But don't wait any more past that. So, a lot of stuff going on. The race down in the Dominican Republic was absolutely insane. I had major imposter syndrome a lot of times while I was down there, where I could do nothing but just sit back and go, how did I get to this point? So no, it was pretty cool, and there was a lot that went into that. There was a lot that was going on with it. There was a lot to follow along with it. There was a lot to understand the format. There was a lot for all of that stuff to happen. Travis Pastrana and Ryan Sipes were kind of the faces of the thing. They were brought in as well to kind of promote it. Obviously, big names in Travis Pastrana and Ryan Sipes. But there were so many riders there. So for the first day, Manny Lettenbichler was there. He ended up leaving after that first day, though, to go to the FIM banquet, I think is where he went. But you had Cody Webb, Tristan Hart, some GNCC boys were there, Stu Baylor, the GNCC champ Jordan Ashburn, Josh Toth was there, Tyler Medaglia, who's like a Swiss Army knife Canadian. He races everything. Tyler Medaglia literally races everything. He's like a Canadian pro motocross champion. He races full gas in the beginning of the season. He's gonna do the full gas enduro series or full gas sprint enduro series next year, because it's before his whole thing gets started. So that'll be cool to see. But he was on the Canadian Motocross Designations team and the ISDE team, like multiple times for both of them, and he did it the same years multiple times too. I thought it's really cool, and it was cool to be able to talk to him a little bit more about that down there. And we're going to have Tyler on the show very soon to talk to him about it. Robbie Marshall, the rip of the masshole, he was down there. Robbie, every time I was around Robbie Marshall down there, I swear my face hurt from laughing so hard. Ronnie Mack was down there. That was pretty cool. I got to spend a lot of time with Ronnie Mack. Seemed to run into bike issues more than once, so I got to spend a lot of time with him on the sidelines and talking with him, so that was pretty cool. Taylor Robert. I was stoked to see Taylor Robert back on a bike. We've talked about it on the show. He had a very bad crash and a very bad injury where he lacerated, I believe it was his spleen and his liver. He had some internal bleeding. A lot of stuff going on, and it seemed like quite a difficult recovery that he had ahead of him. And this was the first time that I saw him back on a bike at all, especially trying to race. So it was cool to see Taylor Robert down there. Unfortunately, he didn't make it very long. He ended up crashing on the first day in the first race and broke his thumb. And by the time we left there on Sunday, his thumb was like 3 times the size. It was all purple. It was all bruised up. So that was a bummer, definitely. It was cool to see him back out there. Wish it would have went better, obviously, but nonetheless, it was cool to see him out there. Rigor Rico, he was a local down there. Logan Sapala, 8 million time hill climb national champion. Also Austin Tyler, also a hill climb champion multiple times. They were both super cool to talk to, and me actually got to talk to Austin Tyler quite a bit. He brought Matt Musgrove there with him, so got to spend a little bit of time with Matt as well. For those that are unfamiliar with Matt, he runs the U.S. Hard Enduro Series, and he also runs the hill climb stuff, and he also runs elevated action sports. Sorry if I got that wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's what it is. Elevated sports, elevated extreme sports, elevated action sports. You can check them out on Instagram. He puts out a lot of good work, and he put out a lot of videos and stuff from the weekend as well. So check them out on Instagram, YouTube, all that stuff. Pooh Sipes was there. Justin Sipes, Ryan Sipes' little brother. Banks Hovey. Banks Hovey is a legend. He's like 20 years old, 21 years old. He's the one that backflipped off of that big wooden berm into the ocean. He also has some X Games medals. He also is the reigning defending pit bike champion of the Travis Pastrana Invitational down there. Got to talk to him quite a bit. Hopefully, we're going to have him on the show very soon as well. So, Banks Hovey, if you don't know about him, now you know. You should look him up and give him a follow. Super cool dude. And like I said, can't wait to hear his stories on the podcast coming up. Troy Smalls is down there. Phil Smagical, he was down there. I actually got to ride on the bus with Phil coming back from day one. And then after that, we talked a good bit throughout the week. One of the most down-to-earth and like cool humans I've ever talked to in my entire life. It's hard to find a better outlook and a better positivity than Smagical himself. For those that don't know, he was attempting a world record side-by-side jump in a Polaris Razor, I think it was. Completely overshot the landing, went to flat, and when he did that, he broke all sorts of stuff in his neck, in his back, collarbone, foot, ribs. He got pretty broken up, and he is what is called an incomplete quadriplegic, and essentially pretty damn close to paralyzed. And he's worked his way back through that injury actually rode all of the courses over the weekend. So the Trials bike crew was Troy Smalls, Magical, and then Greg Duffy. So Duffy was there, who's won Nitro World Games and all sorts of stuff himself. But yes, Magical was out there on a Trials bike. Those three guys, they were some of the funniest people I've ever met in my life as well. But yes, Magical, the big jump, the big on-off that you saw underneath the Red Bull arch, he did that. He jumped off the ledge, off of the big wooden thing. He rode the gnarly courses. It was cool to see and cool to talk to him and hear more about his story. And like I said, you can't find a more positive person on this earth than him. So that was really cool. Renee Columna, he was a local down there. Hobel Coronado, he was a local down there. Peter Weiss, the off-road traveler, he's big on like YouTube and Instagram and stuff. He was down there as well. Steven Rodriguez, Franklin Nogueras. There was a lot of people down there. There was a lot of other locals that were down there. A guy lost his thumb on the second night. I'm telling you, man, it was one of the craziest weeks and craziest things I've ever been a part of. And like I said, the imposter syndrome was absolutely real because I'm sitting around looking, and these are the best riders in the world at what they do, the best hill climbers, some of the best freestylers, best GNCC riders, best hard enduro guys. It was insane. How many people were down there, and I kind of look back and it's like, how did I get invited to this thing? It was cool. The guy running it, Jorge, he was super cool. It was cool to talk to him and chat with him. I think he was pretty pumped on my announcing at the beach race on Sunday, or Saturday. That was the thing. I went down there to be the announcer. That was my whole gig. Like, hey, I want you to come announce it. I said, hey, I will be there. Well, the first 2 days, we literally go and take buses from the resort to the middle of the jungle. And they set up some easy ups, and there's just some random locals out in the woods. And then other than that, it's just all of us, or all of like the industry people and the riders. And there was nothing to announce to us. So I was like, what do you want me to do? And he's like, I don't know. So luckily, I brought my camera, which I almost didn't bring my camera. And I ended up bringing it, which thank goodness I did, or else I wouldn't have had anything to do the first couple of days. But I got some good content and got some good stuff that I'm continuing to edit and go through. So keep an eye out for that kind of stuff. I've posted a couple reels. Day 1 in full is up on our YouTube page right now, On the Pipe Podcast on YouTube. And I kept it raw. I didn't do any fancy editing, didn't put any music over it. So obviously it's the race as I saw it, as I was chasing the riders around, so you can see that. But it starts off with the beforehand, so talking to the riders, showing the pits, showing the riders getting ready, and that kind of stuff. Because I think that's to me, that was like one of the most interesting parts of being over there, and it's one of the parts that like you would never get to see. You get to see the races and the race highlights. So I made sure to put some of that stuff in there just around the pits. To determine the starting order and the starting rows, they did a wheelie contest on like the Segway electric bikes, or kind of like the, what's the name for them? I'm drawing a blank right now. The Segway bikes are the same as the other ones. It's on the tip of my tongue. I don't know why I can't think of it right now. My buddy Travis has one, and I want to ride it. Suron. It's like a Suron bike. The Segway bikes and the Suron bikes, they're pretty much the same thing. But anyway, they had a wheelie contest on those to determine the riding order. So it was on a gravel road, and however far you went, you stood by that mark, and then they just filled in the rows from there. Manny Lettenbichler was the first one to win, and I swear he about rode a wheelie all the way back to the hotel. He ended up winning the wheelie contest, and he was the first one to go. Just took off down the road, and that was that. But yeah, so I put all that stuff on there in the YouTube video. So I think that stuff was interesting to see. And then, of course, we got into the racing action and then talked to a couple of the guys after the race. And then Travis Pastrana was there to hand everybody cold beers after a 2-hour-long hard enduro through the jungle of the Dominican Republic. It was hot. It was humid. It was gnarly. And, yeah, it was just cool to see. So that's on our YouTube channel now. You can check it out. But a lot of things going on, too, was the bikes. So when this whole thing first happened, and, like, I knew Stu was going, so I talked to him about it before, And I think the original plan was to put everything in a shipping container and ship it down, and then that's what you would ride. What ended up happening is the locals down there ended up donating their bikes. So every rider that you saw was actually riding a local's bike. And keep in mind, the way that it was explained to us is there's two very prominent groups in the Dominican Republic. You have the very poor and you have the very rich. And there's really not an in-between. And obviously the rich ones are the ones with the dirt bikes and the motorcycles. But at the same time, parts aren't all that accessible and new bikes aren't all that accessible. It's not like you go down and see 3 different dealerships on the corner. And so these bikes that all of these riders had to choose from were not brand new off the showroom floor factory bikes, or definitely not factory bikes. But even that, so there were, out of the whole lot of them, there was, I would say, 2 good bikes and a couple decent bikes, and then everything else was good luck. I hope it makes it. And so it was an uphill battle for some people. Like Jordan Ashburn, we'll start there. The bike that he was riding, he ended up on a KTM. So if you've seen Jordan on a KTM this week, and I think I posted a picture of his bike on the beach, and you were confused about it, this is why. So the first bike that he had, he got on it, and the first race was supposed to be like a GNCC style track. That's what they kept saying. GNCC style track, like hare scramble style track, open, fast, for the GNCC guys, for the moto guys. Turns out it was actually a legit hard enduro. And looking at it, it was hard. You have to go back and look at some of the videos, but it was literally riding up and down coral. Like the rocks there, it was just coral. Like all that land, all those mountains used to be under the ocean at some point because it's nothing but coral. And it's like razor sharp. It's literally like racing on razor blades with sandpaper over them. The gnarliest thing I've ever seen. Like if you fell down one of those hills, you might as well have fallen down a cheese grater. That's how this place was. But he gets on his first bike, and it was a KTM too, but it had white plastic, so it was a white KTM. And as soon as everyone takes off, everyone goes running to this hill climb that's right on the backside of the finish line that was not even a mile into the woods. Like, not even a mile into the woods. And then everyone comes by. We see them all coming up. We see them all coming up. We see them all coming up. And I'm walking up the hill, and Mary Ashburn, Jordan's wife, says, "I didn't see Jordan, did you?" And I said, "Now that you mention that, no, I didn't see Jordan." And I go back and I check my camera, and I was like, "No, I sure didn't see Jordan." Well, turns out he didn't even make it to that point before the bike just completely locked up. And so not even a mile into it, his bike locks up. And then someone went down looking for him, but then we all kept going to see the rest of the race and see the rest of the riders. Well, it turns out Jordan walked all the way back up to the pits, got some oil or got some gas, got something, went back down to his bike, somehow got it started, limped it back up to the pits, swapped some stuff around real quick to one of the other bikes that were there, because the only Huskies that were there had broken subframes and some other stuff going on with it. So he swapped some of the good stuff off of his bike to one of the Huskies with the broken subframe, and he goes back out there. And I see him later on in the race, and it's a guy coming up to me, and I was like, who? I didn't recognize him, obviously, because it was a different bike. I didn't know what happened at this point. And he stops right in front of me and starts talking to me in the middle of the woods. And I was like, who is this dude talking to me? And I can like see through the goggles that it's Jordan. I was like, dude, where did this bike come from? So he, obviously he's in the middle of the race, so he didn't stop and tell the whole story, but basically explained what happened and then kept going. So he ended up finishing the race on that bike after swapping it after his first one didn't make it to the 1 mile marker. Now, the reason I tell that story is because then you fast forward to the end of the week. It's a cumulative thing. So there was 3 days of racing, and the final race was a race on the beach of the resort. And that's the one with all the obstacles, jumping in airplane wings, jumping in an airplane, out of an airplane, the berm over the water, the step on, step off. That was where all that stuff was. Jordan won the first moto and then got third in the second moto and second in the third moto. the way it worked out is the top 3 guys, Cody, Webb, Tristan Hart, and Jordan Ashburn, all tied on points. And so it basically came down to the finishing order for the last moto. Anyway, I digress. What happened is Jordan, for the week, he got 3rd place on the second night, which that's a different story in and of itself. And then he gets 2nd or 3rd place, 3rd place on day 3. So 3rd place on day 2, 3rd place on day 3, behind Tristan and Cody both times. But you think about it, and if he had a good bike, or any bike different than the one he had on the first day, and he was able to log a good result on the first day, he probably would have been on the overall podium for the week, the way that he was riding. And I say that the second day was a bit of a story because we were sitting there, and this one was at nighttime. So it was pitch black, and you're in the middle of the jungle, and it's even harder and even more gnarly coral. It's all coral, once again, but there's like straight walls up of coral. A dude lost his thumb falling down coral. That was one of the nastiest things I've ever seen. Dude fell down the hill right behind me. He's like an older guy. He was a local. Fell backwards down the hill, and I just see blood all over his pants. Don't know what's going on. End up looking down. Dude, his thumb was hanging on by a piece of skin, bone popping out. It was disgusting. But anyway, so it was a very tough track, and it was at nighttime. And I was following everyone around, kind of filming everybody. And then Cody wins it. Cody wins it? Cody wins it or Tristan wins it? I think Cody wins it. So he goes up on the podium. Tristan goes up on the podium. And there was a local that I thought was running in the number 3 spot. But then I see Jordan come by. And at this point, like, a lot of riders had stopped riding. A lot of riders had bike issues, so had to pull off. So then Jordan pulls up next to the podium and sits right next to me. And we're just sitting there talking. I was like, oh, dude, how was it? He's like, oh, man, that track was not. And we're just sitting there talking, going back and forth for like a solid couple of minutes. And then the local comes by and finishes. And I go, oh, right there's 3rd place right there. And Jordan's like, who? I was like, that guy right there. He's like, I just passed him a minute ago. Like, right over here. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, yeah, I just passed that guy on this last lap. I was like, were you a lap down? Because like I said, I didn't know who stopped. I didn't know who got lapped. I didn't know any of that. He's like, no. He's like, no one passed me the whole time except for that guy, and then I just passed him back. And I was like, you might be 3rd place then. And so we start looking around and finding everybody and go and check score. And sure enough, I'd been sitting here talking to him for a couple minutes. Turns out he was on the overall podium. He got 3rd place. So after we confirmed it, he went up on the podium. But no, it was just kind of a funny moment. But yeah, so you think about it, and it's like, what if he had a good bike on day number 1? The reason that he was on a KTM after day number 1 is, as we mentioned, Taylor Robert, after day 1, broke his thumb, and he was on one of the decent bikes. And so Jordan staked claim to that bike. So the rest of the week, he rode the bike that Taylor Robert started out on, which was a KTM that was in pretty good shape. And yeah, that's what he rode the second 2 days on. But I mean, dude, some of those bikes, like, so Toth, his bike had tubeless on it. The tires were both tubeless, and there was patches in the front, like plugs in the front tire and in the back tire, and the owner of the bike said he wouldn't even trust them. And so he ended up swapping a rear tire, I think from one of the Huskies or Ashburn's bike, and put a Moose in a rear tire, but he kept the tubeless front. Well, the tubeless front made it about 2 corners before it went completely flat. And when I mean completely flat, I don't mean like there was a little bit of air in it, there was a little bit of pressure in it. This thing was completely flat, like uncontrollably flat. In the YouTube video, you see Toth coming straight at me and about takes me out on a downhill. I had to like jump backwards into a hole, cut my leg because he lost control of the bike because there was literally no front tire. So, it was gnarly. It was such a gnarly experience. One of the betas that the dude was riding had a throttle side grip on the left side, like on the clutch side. So there was 4 pieces of safety wire, and the thing still just twisted. Like the grip would just twist every direction possible. It was people were swapping wheels. Stu, his bike had like a seized wheel bearing on it. So he ended up having to find a different wheel and put a different wheel on, but he had already changed that tire, so then you got to change the tire back. Dude, it was crazy. But at the same time, you like look around, you're like, all right, we're down here in paradise. Like we're in right below Punta Cana. Um, we're at this resort, so in between races and stuff, everyone's just hanging out at the resort. It's an all-inclusive resort, so they have like buffets everywhere. There were 6 different restaurants on the actual property. Any of the restaurants are free. The buffet is free. There's bars everywhere. Every bar is free. You can get whatever you want. So at the end of the day, there was a little bit of obstacles to overcome, but at the same time, like everyone's just hanging out in paradise. Like it could how bad could it be? It never could get too bad. And that just kind of seemed to be the vibe of the weekend. It was such a cool week. It was such a laid back, down to earth thing, and yeah, it all reverted back to that. Like, hey man, we're all down in paradise. We're racing a dirt bike. Nobody's career depends on this weekend, and we're just having fun. I will say, the Sherco importer did a much better job down there because Cody Webb, they had a whole ass Sherco van, and Cody was, from what I know, to be basically like a race bike. Like he had a legit bike, he had a legit team, he had a legit pit setup, they had a whole van set up, and he was on good equipment. And then everyone else, but it was cool at the same time because you got the best riders in the world, and throughout the week you would see the locals who own the bikes, and they'd come up and talk to the riders and get so pumped. Like I'm talking about so pumped, like the gas dudes that gave Toth the gas that he was riding. Dude, they were so stoked to see him on that bike. They were like taking pictures of him on it. Couldn't be any more stoked. And same thing with like all the other bikes, except for maybe a couple of the bikes that ended up in the ocean. Maybe the owners weren't too happy about those ones, but everyone else, they were super stoked on, and it was cool to see. It was cool to interact with the locals, and all that stuff. I did learn that there is no way to win when you're in a country with a different language, because I know a little bit of Spanish. I don't know a lot of Spanish. I know a little bit of Spanish. But like you try to speak it, and I always feel like I'm being rude. Like I don't want to speak it and sound rude, but at the same time, like if it was the other way around, I would want people talking to me in English here. And so you would either talk in English to people that don't know any of it, and so they talk to you in Spanish anyway, or like the times that I would try to talk in Spanish, like even something simple as like gracias, they'd be like, you're welcome. So then I would just feel like an idiot that I would try to say something in Spanish and they would respond to me in English. But then I would say something in English and they wouldn't understand me and respond in Spanish. So I don't know. It was just one of the weird things that I noticed about being down there. But it was just such an exciting week. When we first got there, they were building the big the final race, the whole setup down there on the beach, and they continued building it until right before the race started. But it was cool to see that whole thing come together and what they did for that. And then so the first day we got there, that was a 2-hour hard enduro in the jungle. And yeah, Cody ended up chasing down Manny Lettenbichler and Tristan Hart and grabbing the win late in that race, and he was pretty pumped on that. What else? I'm trying to think if anything else interesting happened on day number 1. I don't think there was a whole lot of interesting stuff. Taylor Robert got hurt. That was very unfortunate. Day 2, we didn't have to leave the resort or anything until 3. I ended up filming a bunch of interviews and stuff that day, so that kind of took up my time for that. But then when we left and went over there, they were having a full-blown Sur-On bike race. Like they had a Sur-On and Segway track set up at the front of this thing, and then they had like a bag jump and stuff down there. It was like a whole event. But then you drive a little bit past that, and you see the moto set up. So then we set everything up, and he's like, all right, let's go down here and walk the track. And so we go walk the track, and it's like 1.5 kilometers. In freedom units, that's like 3/4 of a mile, a little bit less than a mile in freedom units. So we walk it as a group and walking with everyone. So like Ronnie Mack, Robbie Marshall, Stu, like everyone down there walking it. And Tristan, all those dudes. And it is the gnarliest stuff you'd ever, like, all the riders. it was funny to be a part, like, see them looking at lines. And keep in mind, this is not only some of the gnarliest stuff you've seen on Coral, but it's also going to be at night. It was a night race, and they had some lights strung through the trees that at the time you're not really sure how bright it's going to be. It ended up being pretty bright. Like, I wouldn't call it bright, but you could for sure see what was going on. And then everyone had lights and stuff too on their bikes and on their helmets, so it ended up being good. But at the time, we're not knowing how dark it's going to be down in there. So walking the track with that in mind as well. That is the video that I'm editing on right now to take some stuff out of it. But some of the funniest conversations. So when we post that one up on YouTube, the day 2 raw highlights, it's going to include that track walk and all the stuff that all the riders were saying walking the track, and then show some of the racing and how absolutely gnarly it is and how crazy Jordan Ashburn or Cody Webb and Tristan Hard are. They were jumping this like splat line that was insane, like didn't look possible. But that video is going to be very entertaining because I'm going to leave in all the comments. It was also one of the very few races, like at GNCC, everything's fast. You see them for a second, they're back gone. This race, I could literally walk up to riders and talk to them while they're on the track. And I did that a few times too, with Toth, Jordan, Pooh Sipes. Like there's a lot of times where you just walk up and talk to people because they're either taking a break or they're stuck on something or they're looking for a line or they're waiting on somebody to get out of their line. And it was really cool. So there's just a unique little video. And then the final day, as we mentioned, it was the beach race. I didn't get any video of that. I think there's some video on my camera that my girlfriend took while I was announcing. So I'll go through it and check what I have. But I really don't have, I don't think, enough to make an edit of the beach race because all of a sudden I was stuck in the middle of the track on top of the Red Bull truck. It's like one of those custom-made Red Bull trucks. I found out it was made on a Land Rover Defender body. But ended up standing on the roof of one of those things with a microphone and announcing the whole race from the center of the track, which was unreal in and of itself, especially once the beach started filling up with people watching and everyone's hanging on the fences at the end of the track. And it was cool to be able to call that battle because, like, announcing Full Gas, a lot of it is just calling names. And you're calling up names, you're lining people up. It is what it is. And then same thing, like I've been announcing at Mid-East. You do the introductions, you call the starts, but then it's just kind of reading through results and then seeing the riders when they come around. This was seeing the riders the whole time, calling the battles, calling what's going on, getting the crowd hyped up, getting the crowd to make some noise. And it was pretty cool. It was a surreal experience. I had a lot of fun doing it. I think they were pumped with me doing it. The guy that runs the Terra Inferno race told me that no one will ever announce another race there that's not me. So that gives me some cool motivation for next year. Hopefully that I'll be back because it was an unreal experience. But long story long, that is why I don't have much footage or enough footage of day 3 to really put out a video. But there is a lot of video out there. Matt Musgrove with Elevated, I know that he put some stuff out there and will continue to put some stuff out there, so check him out. And then they're supposed to be cutting up a TV show that they're going to post afterwards, so you'll be able to see all the action down there on that one. But yeah, what a week of racing, what a week of hanging out. And it was cool too because to see all the Nitro guys that were there with Travis. I didn't know who was going to be there. I didn't know which one of those guys were going to be there. Turns out most of them were there. And then, like I said, you got all the best riders in the world. I got new hill climb riders that are the best in their sport that, I mean, we've never seen that on the East Coast. And so it was cool to meet those guys and talk to them and hear from them. And then, obviously, the big one, Travis. Travis Pastrana is the one guy that I thought that I would get starstruck by. If I just walked out somewhere and saw Travis Pastrana or saw him at a race, figured that would be the guy I get starstruck by. But ended up being one of the coolest dudes ever. So down to earth, especially for everything that he's accomplished and everything that he's changed in the sport and just everything that he does and has done. it was really cool to sit there and talk with him. Fun fact, I don't know how many people know this or not, but Jason Hooper, who started the Full Gas series, grew up with Travis. Like, from the time that they were kids, like, grew up in the same town, like, very close to each other, very close friends with one another. So me, Toth, and Travis were sitting there, and I brought that up to Travis and heard some absolutely hilarious stories. Definitely not going to get into that on here, but it was cool to kind of make that connection and be like, oh, yeah, I announced Hooper Series, the Full Gas races. And by the way, happy birthday, Jason Hooper. Today is his 40th birthday. Enjoying the retired promoter life. But, yeah, so that was cool. But, yeah, just with Travis running the race and kind of hanging out, and he's still recovering from his base jumping injuries and everything, got to spend a lot of time with him because we're both in the same group, chasing everyone around and watching the race and seeing what's going on. So it ended up being really cool on that front. Like I said, just really got a chance to just sit and talk with him a bunch everywhere we went, like cracking jokes with each other and drinking Presidente beers with each other. And the first time I met him was the night that I got there. I'm double fisting pina coladas, and he comes by like super stoked about it and like daps me up because I was double fisting right when I got there. But yeah, I don't know. It was to remember exactly where I was and remember the exact moment in 2006 watching the X Games and him land the double flip. Like, that's the level of Travis Pastrana fan I was. And it probably, as nerdy as it sounds or weird as it sounds to kind of talk about that, I'd be willing to bet that most people that ride a dirt bike would have those same thoughts about Travis Pastrana. I mean, it's Travis, and I think everyone can respect what he's done for the sport and how big he is in the sport. So, no, it was just cool, especially you see someone your whole entire life everywhere you look, and then all of a sudden they're standing in front of you. It was just a surreal experience, and I mean, I still get those feelings with everyone in our world, like the GNCC world, like seeing Caleb, seeing Stu, knowing that I do a show with Stu, that we talk on a weekly basis, like doing stuff with Strang, like riding with those guys, going to the Oz Ranch, and like filming some stuff with Strang. Like, I still geek out on those and like really sit back at those moments, like how did I get here? Like, how did this? I should not be around this group of people. And so there was just a lot of that feeling. Like I said, I still get that to this day with all of the riders. But there's definitely a lot of that when you fly to another country and you're in paradise at an all-inclusive resort. That just really gives you a little bit of that extra how in the world did I get here feeling. It was cool. It was a lot of fun. It was a surreal experience. And like Ryan Sipes was there. Got to talk to Ryan a lot. He's still on crutches from his broken pelvis as well, but Ryan was a guy that I kind of got to know like at the Full Gas races when he would come out. The Full Gas races were like really intimate races. Like, everyone hung out. Everyone would bench race. You get time in between tests. It's not just show up and be on edge until you go race for 3 hours and then go home. It's like you're racing all weekend, so you're hanging out Saturday night, and then you're hanging out Sunday, and you're hanging out in between tests. So kind of got to know him a little bit of that, and then him and I have been talking a good bit this year, like working together on some stuff, and so it was cool to be down there like face to face and talking with him, and all their families were down there. So it was just it was a really cool week. It was really surreal. I'm very thankful for it, very appreciative of it. And like I said, we got a lot of stuff coming out from it. I still got a lot of video that I haven't posted, so you'll see those in Reels coming out. Right now, that first YouTube video, the day one, is live on our YouTube channel. You'll see some more of that stuff coming out on our YouTube channel as the week progresses, and you'll also see some more of that stuff being posted on Instagram and things like that. But yeah, so that was the week that was. We're going to have some riders that were down there on the show in the coming weeks to talk to them. And hear a little bit about it, and plus everything else that everyone has going on. But I mentioned getting some house cleaning stuff, so we're going to move past the Dominican Republic and talk about some other stuff. The Spotify rap thing came out today. I was posting some of that. I thought that stuff was pretty cool and pretty exciting. OTP is the top podcast on. This is just Spotify only, and to put it in perspective, about 1/5 of my downloads or our OTP downloads come from Spotify, and pretty much the rest come from Apple. So a big number come from Apple, and then still like a way bigger number than I thought comes from Spotify. But like I said, that's about 1/5 of the overall listens. But on Spotify, OTP was the top podcast for 368 of you. It was the top 5 podcast for 1,104 of you, and it was the top 10 podcast for 1,416 of you. So what that is Spotify Wrapped. It kind of sums up what you listen to all year long. And so of all the podcasts people listen to, 368 of them listen to OTP more than any other podcast on the app. So that's how that whole thing kind of works. This is a crazy stat. 3,357 minutes of podcast put out there in the world this year by OTP. And the watch time or the listen time, those numbers just don't even make sense to me. How people have listened to my voice for this long. But I appreciate the hell out of every single one of you. None of this stuff would be possible without everyone that is listening to this right now. It was in the top 10% for the most shared globally. So in the entire world, in every language, in the entire world, for every podcast that is in Spotify, every podcast you can possibly find in Spotify, we were in the top 10% most shared. So that's people sending it to a buddy. Hey, listen to this show. Hey, Stu was on the show. Jordan Ashburn was on this show. Thad Duvall was on this show. Jonathan Johnson was on the show. Whoever you want to pick was on the show. Evan Smith on the show. Ben Delco on the show. Whoever you want to say was on the show and shared it. Top 10% of all podcasts on Spotify. And in the top 5% of most followed podcasts. So people that follow on Spotify, we're in the top 5% of all podcasts on the app, which is absolutely insane. It doesn't make any sense to me. So thank you all very much. Thank you to everyone that has ever supported this show. Thank you to everyone that continues to listen to this show. I could not do any of this without you. I do very much appreciate it. And that being said, wherever you're listening to this at, if you could go ahead and hit that subscribe button. So if it's on Spotify, subscribe to us on there. If it's on Apple, subscribe to us on there. If you're on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe to us on there. It really helps out with the analytics to figure out where people are coming from, where they're listening to, and then stuff like this at the end of the year. I think these are really cool stats. I think they're stuff to be proud of, and I can't thank any of you all enough for helping get to this point. 27.9 thousand hours is the time listened on Apple Podcasts. We broke the 300,000 mark for plays this year. So we hit 100,000 at the beginning of this year when I wanted to start doing this thing full time. And then we tripled that in just 1 year. So all of this stuff is impressive. We had great sponsors on board for this year. Zach Tussle was on board. Beta has been on board. Armored Graphics has been on board since the beginning. So it's been really cool to have all of that involved. And once again, that wouldn't happen without you guys all listening to this. So I do appreciate it. Hopefully we can keep this thing moving and going forward. This week was a little bit of a weird week. Tried to set something up for yesterday. Didn't work out. We moved it to today. It didn't work out today. To be honest with you, it's 100. It's that's should show where my mind is at. It's not 104. It's 104 in the morning right now. So I guess it's technically Thursday, December 8th. But like I said, plans didn't work out. And so we're here bringing this to you the best that I possibly can. And yeah, plan to keep that going forward. So, like I said, tried to do some stuff this week. Didn't quite work out. So, next week, we have a couple confirmed guests already. We're going to try to stick to Tuesdays and bring a couple guests on. We have a lot of people to talk to during the off-season. So, we hope to fill this void with the off-season without a lot of racing going on. We talked about it before. Carolina XC is going on if you're in the Carolina area. A lot of it is in sand, so it's been raining nonstop and cold here. But Carolina XC is a good series to check out. Zach Hayes, former XC3 champion, runs that series. I think he's won a whole bunch of Citra overall championships as well. But you can go check them out. But other than that, not a whole lot of racing. So we're going to try to bring you some content to keep it pumping out through the offseason. Got a lot of people in mind already. And then I'm sure we'll add to that list as we continue to go on. But because you guys are so loyal and because you guys listen to the show, we're going to stop. The show has probably stunk. If you listened to it the past couple weeks, it's probably stunk. It's just me talking. Right now I'm at 45 minutes of just me talking. I know you guys want to hear from other people. You don't want to hear from just me. So we're going to try to get back to that. I do appreciate you sticking tough, hanging out, and hanging with us. And like I said, we're trying to get this show good again. So as always, be a friend, tell a friend. Let somebody know about OTP. Silly season was a big topic of interest. It was a big thing that people were asking for. And now it's still a topic of interest because it's like some people I feel like are upset about it. I don't know. It's a weird thing. But December happened and contracts ended and new contracts begin. So now you see people coming out of the woodwork announcing their new teams. We saw Toth ride his new bike and make his announcement. We saw Stuart Baylor down in the Dominican, although he hasn't officially announced his new team. It's pretty well known at this point. He's not being quiet about it, and he's already been on the bike with the graphics and racing it. But KTM, Johnny Gerard announced theirs. Gas announced theirs with Thad. Yamaha announced the Zach Osborne deal that everyone told me I was crazy for, and that wasn't true. All of a sudden, now it's true. Ricky Russell at Yamaha, they announced that. Cowie still hasn't made their announcement, but they're doing their team shoot in Cali next week, so it'll have to be made at that point. And you'll see the new addition over there. Jesse Hainsley, I think he made his farewell, but he didn't make his new announcement. Yeah. So the announcements are coming out. And for all the people that there was some heavy stuff saying that don't know what I'm talking about, that nothing I said was true, that everything was wrong. So far, everything that we mentioned might happen has happened, and we've seen that be announced. So there you go. Just add a little bit of validity to the show. I know I've said it on here a million times before, but it's not like I hear something from some random person and then come on the show and talk about it. If it makes it to the show, then it's been confirmed by more than one source and more than one source that I feel to be reliable. And it seems like that was the case with Silly Season here, especially as we see the official announcements rolling in. So those that have listened to Silly Season, I see a lot of that in the comments as stuff gets released about people already knowing. Appreciate you guys listening, and hopefully this gives you a little bit of faith. And if you are in the category of people that are upset for me announcing Silly Season, I would just like to go ahead and reiterate two things. One, every other sport, this is what happens. They talk about it. They talk about contracts. People in the big sports find out they're traded or cut from Twitter. They find out before their bosses even told them. And then you look at Pulp, MX, and what they do for Supercross and Motocross, same exact thing. Break the news. I mean, that's kind of what the goal of the podcast was, not necessarily to steal people's news, but to get more of a spotlight and get more information and stuff out, to have people to have a source like this to get information from rather than just being in the dark. So I know everything's been a giant secret in the off-road world, and so I think that's why some people are upset. But the last thing I'll leave it on is, if we're not talking about team changes and we're not talking about what's going on, then we're not talking about off-road racing until February. And that means from the end of October to the beginning of February, the sport doesn't exist. The riders don't exist. The sponsors don't exist. The teams don't exist. The exposure doesn't exist. So it goes back to that all publicity is good publicity. It gets the buzz going. It gets everything stirred up, and it gets eyes on the sport. It keeps eyes on the sport. So if you were upset with it, I slightly apologize, but at the same time, it goes a long way in helping with the exposure and keeping the eyeballs on the sport. So I hope you can understand. I hope you can see it from that point of view. And I hope you're excited to see Zach freaking Osborne at a GNCC track on a Yamaha, of all things, and all the other team changes. It's going to be a good season. It's going to be a good year. And, yeah. So, thank you for listening tonight. As always, be a friend, tell a friend. Next week, hopefully, we'll have a show worth listening to. If you made it to this point in this one, congratulations. You're a saint and a scholar. Really appreciate it if you did make it this far. But, yeah, be on the lookout for more content coming out from last week and also over the off-season. The banquet, GNCC banquet, is this weekend, so I'm sure we'll get some stories out of that. If you're going to it, safe travels and good luck. Next weekend is a Carolina XC race, I do believe. Don't know where it's at, probably somewhere in South Carolina. But that'll be going on. Other than that, all the other series are I do want to say, if you did make it this far, on onthepipepodcast.com, I have made a 2023 schedule that has all the race series on it, similar to the one that I made last year. That will be on the website tomorrow at some point. So keep an eye out for that on thepipepodcast.com. You'll be able to get that Excel file where you see all the races next to each other. It does include the Bite GP series starting on June 17th, 173 days from today. Well, now I guess it's 172 days, from today. But, yeah, you can find that on thepipepodcast.com. Check out Financial Advisors, DenverNC.com, and PayToUSA.com, and ArmoredGraphics.com. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.